Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading Crossbow, and this is our conclusion episode for the first book we read called The Poppy War. And this was Robert's choice, by the way. I'm going to start off the episode by saying I did not pick this book. Robert picked this book, and it's basically all your fault, by the way. It's all your fault.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad to be of service.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, man. Yeah, I read the book, and it's lots of thoughts on this, and I'm not, I'm hoping that through the recording of this episode, I come to my conclusions, because I'm still kind of like here and there and crying underneath my pillowcase. I'm all over the place, Rob.
Well, I'm glad I had that much effect. Good literature should have a big impact on you.
Oh, good literature. Okay. All right. That's how we're starting this off. Okay. Well, you know what? At that note, I'll just let you keep on going with that.
All right. Well, just to give a high level summary, what happened. So this is the book we read. It's The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This was the author's debut novel. So, but it functionally covers, it's a fantasy book centered on a war orphan. This war orphan, in order to get out of a pretty awful foster home, makes it into a military academy for her country. This country is very much I think it's Song Dynasty China, old, medieval era China, swords, bows and arrows, that kind of stuff. So she goes to this military school and learns about a secret that the nation has, which is this setting does have magic. They call it shamanism. But it's not common knowledge, and there's something a little off about it, something a little dangerous. And then about midway through the book, the Empire's antagonist attacks. It's called the Federation of Mugen, and when Mugen attacks, this is pulling very strongly from World War II, Japan invading China. And for the last half of the book, essentially, it's a war story, as the main character, Rin, and her band of brothers try to survive the war and protect their nation from the enemy. Does that sound about what you read?
It sounds like if I read that on the back of a book cover, it wouldn't have sold me.
Oh.
I'm going to be so rude. Oh, man, to all of our listeners. One, thank you for supporting us and watching this episode. And two, I'm sorry, because I'm about to be all sorts of cruel to Robert.
So one of the things that when we were first going through this book, Lana had sent me a text message saying that and we'll bring it up, but basically it said something to the lines of, yeah, I think we need to discuss some trigger warnings for this book, and because I'm about halfway through, and my response was, I hate to tell you, but you haven't even got to the part that needs the trigger warnings. That's coming ahead, and I was
not prepared.
I tried to prepare you. I warned you that.
Okay, but there's from this moment forward, we need levels of trigger warnings, I think, because you made it sound like this was just going to be a little bit this is coming up, it's bad. How bad? Well, it's not that bad. How bad? Well, it's okay. It's not going to be that's kind of how we talked about that. So I don't know. Maybe I need to adjust my meter for you.
Yes.
Or maybe you need to adjust your meter for me. I'm not sure, but we need to figure this out.
So at least to disclose some of these trigger warnings. In the first half of the book, there is drug use, self-harm, child abuse for sure. But once you get to the war section of the book, I mean, it is all manner of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And it is a hard reality that these characters have to live through. And because it's based on real life, these are very dark moments. There's one particular chapter that is a tough read. And if it wasn't based on real world, I would probably have skimmed it a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I'll pick that one up from there. So when it comes to trigger warnings, Robert gave the quick overview of most of them. So if you another one I want to say is if you've had difficulty having children, have always wanted to have children, male, female, doesn't matter. There might be a section in the early part of the book. I actually mentioned this in my halfway episode, so you can go back and watch that. It's not written in a bad way. It's written in a way that's very much like a young woman's decision about her own body. So, but just letting you know that one. But then the next one, I'm going to give you a trigger warning about the trigger warning. So yeah. So trigger warning about the trigger warning. Don't listen to this trigger warning if, I have to go into it. I feel like I have to do this because Rob and I talked about this before recording the show. My life in kind of the pseudo nerd limelight, like Y-list celebrity, Z-list celebrity status of my cosplay time, I went through some pretty difficult stuff on the internet. People would send me all sorts of, graphic messages. Sometimes they were in a way that was meant to lure me in to the nerds in the basement, but sometimes they were really, really bad. So I'm bringing this one up because this particular spot in the book traumatized me. I couldn't sleep the night I read it. I had a really, really rough time. So I'm trigger warning the trigger warning for you because I probably need to tell you how bad it is if you've read something like this. Because I had somebody in my DMs back when I was doing cosplay that basically wrote a very graphic way that they would attack me and harm me if they ever met me in person. And one of the things that they did in the novel to a young person with a knife was how someone had very, very graphically described what they would do to me. So I'm saying that because if that affected me that much after reading this, I was just I felt bile rise up from my stomach into my throat. I thought I was gonna throw up. That's how bad it was for me to read it. But granted, that's a personal situation. And so in this book, which is this size, I don't know which edition it is. We can put it in the comments. But it's page 427. So you can completely skip page 427. It doesn't have any bearing on the novel. It's not needed at all. She could have taken it out and it would have been fine. But as Rob said, this is a graphic portrayal of events that actually happened. So, and then I know Robert will get into this more, but the author has their PhD in what, history? Is that right? Yes.
I think she's still working on the PhD, but she hasn't. I think she last has a master's in Chinese history.
So yeah, that's a lot of minutes to talk about trigger warnings and probably more than we'll ever focus on that. But part of me wanting to do this podcast too is bring to light some of the stuff that I've gone through myself, and Rob too, as we start talking about our personal lives more, very real, and trauma affects people differently. So that's the last we'll talk about it for this episode, but now you know.
All right, well,
should we warm things up?
Yeah.
Shall we bring it back?
How about we warm things up with you just described a very personal experience, so I'm going to I have something to confess as well. Part of the reason why I actually selected this book was because I'd seen a quote, an interview from the author, and the author described how one of the inspirations for this story was Chairman Mao, the early leader of the Chinese Communist Party. And the author was trying to explain or understand how a person goes from being essentially a nobody or, an average person to becoming, a war criminal, genocidal person, without falling into just saying, "Oh, well, they're a psychopath." What would lead a person down that kind of a path? And I found that to be an interesting question. So I guess I would question for you would be, do you think the author succeeded in trying to explain how a person falls to bad, crimes against humanity?
That is a tough one. It's funny. We make our notes before this episode, and I did make a note actually off to the side here of a thought-provoking comment, just like you said, like, what is successful writing versus good writing? And this is a good moment to bring that up, because I was reading a bunch of reviews of this book and a lot of people's different interpretations, because I thought maybe I'm feeling too strongly. I kind of want to read around a bit. And I saw some really great, wonderful reviews and some other reviews that, kind of emphasize some things I was feeling. And I think that the author successfully writes about it and does it in a way that almost seems like you're writing a thesis on a bad person. I think it could have been better writing, could have been good writing. They could have done a much better job if they would have developed the characters more. But that's probably more topic for another section of our show. But yeah, character development made it fall flat in several sections for me. But from a successful point of view, did they hit the topics, hit the paragraphs needed to make sure that they conveyed what they were saying? Sure. But maybe it's because they have their PhD in history. Again, I forgot. You already told me. Yeah. Maybe that's why. But it felt to me like they were just trying to hit the key points, and then they did that.
Yeah. So,
maybe that's mean.
For me, I see this more like kind of like the whole controversy around the end of Game of Thrones with Daenerys, where, people didn't see the evil, until she's, I guess spoiler, the scorch in the city. But
if you haven't seen Game of Thrones yet, though, yeah. I mean, come on. So,
but essentially, the reality was the clues were already they were always there between Daenerys, crucifying the masters and burning the different cities, burning down the building with herself inside it because she knew she was immune to fire, killing John's friend's family. Burning them because burning
the cute ones, yeah.
Burning them because they wouldn't kneel, and they wouldn't kneel just because they said, "I've already sworn an oath. I'm not going to be an oath breaker." And she said, "I understand." Burn them. So the clues were always there, but the book didn't, or the way that story was told didn't really get the audience there at the same pace and that's an issue for that. And I think I would say I would agree with the criticism of, I'm not sure this book, it definitely tried, but I'm not sure it fully explained it for me.
Yeah, well, I think that when you say the signs were there, the signs were too obvious for me to be there. It wasn't like I was able to get too attached to the main character. I felt that a bit in parts 1 and parts 2, her early life, and we're trying not to spoil her too much in this segment. We'll get spoiler later. We'll let you guys know. But so if you're watching right now, don't worry. I'm not going to give too much away. I said this in my halfway story, but like her relationship with her like adoptive brother, things like that. That was pretty good character development in the early stages of this book, but there were too many signs even early on that to me that was like, this person's gonna maybe do something bad. Yeah. So I didn't get that break my heart moment that maybe we would have gotten in Game of Thrones with Daenerys, where it's like, no, the sun, the moon, the stars, don't do this to me. Never had that with this main character. It's kind of like, okay. Oh yeah, she went bad.
Yeah, and I would agree. I saw the way the story was progressing, and I was like, yeah, this is probably where this is going. Where I think the author did absolutely fail is with the Federation of Mugen, the Japan analog of this story, because they are monolithically evil. in this story. I mean, there is no, oh, there was one good guy that maybe, during this one scene maybe helped let someone go, or help them survive even though they would have been a prisoner. No, they're unapologetically purely evil. I mean, they might as well be orcs or demons, because there is
no redemption.
There's zero redemption for the Mugen. I think that's actually something that was missed a bit. I think that was a big miss, even for the author's intended vision of exploring the nature of evil and war crimes and that kind of stuff.
I think what I like about it, though, to not be so, negative Nelly over here, is I am not a big historian. I'm not a big history buff. I tend to get bored. I don't love historical, really anything, unless it's like Pride and Prejudice and you got that cute guy dripping wet in the river. I derailed this podcast, but unless it's that kind of historical fiction, I'm out. But this made it very, very interesting, because you had given me some warning about oh, this is actually kind of true. And that made me curious. And it made me really realize that there's a whole section of history that I just, especially as Americans, right? We don't really get educated in this type of, this type of historical information. So that was very interesting to me.
Okay. Well, I guess we've talked about this enough. Let's talk about something a little more fun, which is, this is a fantasy book. Let's talk about magic. Yes. I actually think this book has a pretty unique magic system that I don't know if I really encountered before. What do you think?
No. Totally. Drug-induced magic? Can we fairly call it that?
Yeah. It's elevating your mind to access the gods.
So, yeah. So for the majority of the book, for most of the characters, in order to access the magic, if you can even call it magic, I guess, but yeah, access the shamanism, controlling of elements, if you will, because that's a theme in a lot of books, controlling and games, World of Warcraft, that's definitely a theme, and in a lot of things we love. But this was, yeah, drug fueled. I mean, whether in different versions too, smoking opium, eating the seeds, heroin at some point, in the story. So there's an actual garden mentioned at one point where all sorts of different types of psychedelics are being grown.
Even mushrooms and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this makes me think about it on so many levels. So okay, I'm gonna totally give another interesting fact about myself. I have never been high. And I know a lot of people are gonna laugh at me about that. You don't have to say whether you have or not. I never have, but this makes me wonder. And I'm dead serious about this, Robert. What if all my stoner friends are just shamans?
They know the secret, apparently.
I mean, but seriously, there's something I don't know. Maybe I haven't gotten high yet, but maybe I should, because magic? Okay.
and in this setting, the magic, though, getting high isn't enough to give you magical powers. You do have to have some training and some, mental control, meditative ability training, in order to actually leverage that altered consciousness to access the pantheon, which is where these gods are. And I actually really find the gods themselves to be an interesting concept. They're described as basically just being forces of nature. They just exist. They're not the creator gods of many modern religions. These are more, so if you, to go from a different book, which is The Sandman, or if you've seen the TV show, the endless of The Sandman are basically just concepts of nature. They exist because those things must exist. The concept of dreaming must exist, and so on. the concept of death. Death is a necessary thing, you have to have it in order to have life. And that's the concept of the endless. And these gods in the Poppy War have that same kind of feel. They just are. They're not out there like pulling the strings of reality. They are aspects of reality. They represent some part of reality. And with the shamans getting access to their abilities is kind of world changing.
It's probably also important to bring up too that the gods themselves. So one thing we kind of left out is that you have to do exactly what Robert said. You can't just be like, like I mentioned all my stoner friends. You can't just like turn on South Park, smoke some weed and go say hi to the gods. It's not gonna happen, right? So you gotta train yourself. You gotta be a Jedi master. And even then, after you do all of that, the gods still have to gift it upon you, at least in some situations. So the gods themselves, like once you attain this level of, I guess we'll just say shamanism. I don't know if there's some other word that they really used. Once you attain that, then you won't even access all of it. Like maybe a sliver of the power. But then in a few situations of the novel, the god themselves has to find you worthy. And has to use you as a conduit. They use the word conduit in the novel. So the person who is using the magic, being a shaman, they're actually a conduit for the god themselves. So, and then there's another element to that I'll leave out, so we can be spoiler free. That's very, very interesting. So if you read it, I'm curious what you think about what you think about how they obtain their connection to this magic. Well, actually elements. It seems to be element based in the novel. Yes.
The many of the gods that are seen in the book, such as their aspects of nature, such as wind, shadow, fire. But each one, even the fire one, for example, also represents passionate things, like even just a feeling of revenge. Not just fire. And the darkness god has a need to get secrets and collect secrets, and so there's there's more than just the core element, but that is kind of the easy way to represent it.
Yeah, and I like that. So when we're talking about magic systems, we're going to end up talking about magic systems a lot. Like we've each read a bunch of books. We have sort of our favorite ones that we've encountered. One thing I really liked about this one was the inaccessibility of it all. Because not only was the person being like a conduit for the god, but there was also things that get in the way. There's sort of a built-in system, whether that be spirits, whether that be in the form of a gatekeeper. There's gatekeepers mentioned a few times. So even if you can get to the Pantheon, even if you can get access to this, there's still gonna be things that kind of cut you off of it. Warnings, if you will. We'll leave it at that. So, and that made it very interesting to me that it wasn't just so simply obtainable. It was a very complex, super complex magic system. So, yeah. A+, Rob, for that.
Yeah. So I guess let's we're talking about things we like. How about, is there anything in particular that you remember as being your favorite part of this story? And then we'll get into the criticisms after that, but let's start out positive.
Yeah. So, couple things. I think two parts were my favorites in particular, just because I'm very visual when I'm reading, and it is a full-on movie in my head. I see it in full color. I become third person video games, and I'm watching everything. And I love that my brain has this magic. Yes, it's book goggles. Exactly, Rob. So two moments that made that happen for me. There's, and not too spoilery, I gave my halfway. These are all in my halfway review of the book. And most of the crazy happens in the second part. We haven't even touched that. So when Rin chooses her lore, which is, think of it like kind of like at Hogwarts when you have to choose what house you're going to be in. It's sort of like that. So when Rin chooses she didn't, lore was what she chose. That's right. So they can choose like a different study.
And other ones were things like, since it's a military school, it was like strategy and warfare and healing. that kind of stuff.
Exactly. By interesting circumstances that you should read, Rin chooses lore. So, and then her master is quite unique, unusual. I go through this again in the halfway episode, and I had a moment in reading this where it felt very Karate Kid, like a wax on, a wax off, because at some point, and I saw it, and then a bit of Rocky, like da 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 da, right? Like he makes her carry a pig. He gives her like a little piglet. And this little piglet is part of her training. And she has to carry this piglet because this piglet needs really, really good, amazing, crystal clear drinking water. He doesn't say why. It's just stupid. It's the same reason why in The Karate Kid. It doesn't really say why wax on, wax off until later you find out like he's blocking moves. No blocking moves happens because she carries a pig, but she has to carry the pig to some hill back down every single day. And she has to do this before her classes. It makes her smell like swine. She's already a misfit. She's already not accepted in her classes. And to top it all off, she smells like pig shit. It's great. So when she's carried, I can't remember how long she had to do this, many months. Oh, until the pig was ready to go to the butcher. So the pig ends up being, as you can imagine, I'm going to guess, let's just say 100 and some odd pounds. And Rin's probably, I'm going to call her like a $110. And she has to carry this pig up and down the hill. And I just imagine that whole thing, Rob. I was delighted. And really, this was probably like 2 pages in the book, but for me, it was an entire montage. Style.
Oh, no, that's good.
Okay. Silly, I know.
So for me, what I've actually found that I liked the most was the characterization was done really well in a lot of ways. And an example of that is with the main character. We've already discussed she had this abusive, neglectful living life at the start of the novel. And but that leads into she just craves praise. And she doesn't want to, but she fully admits she just, if she hears even the slightest positive thing coming from a person of authority, it gives her warm feelings inside. She just craves this positive feedback because she's received so little in her history. I like that. Even though she's specifically, I mean, they make it clear she's not the smartest, she's not the fastest, the strongest, she's not the best at anything. But what she is she just tries harder. When she has to pass the test at the beginning of the book, she doesn't do it through, they even specifically call out, she does not have eidetic memory. And she doesn't have the time or the resources to actually learn everything that you must learn to pass this test. Instead, she does it through brute memorization and hard, like high school cramming brute memorization in order to pass this test. And, that the character's not gifted with something that's special necessarily in this way. She's just motivated. A different character, for example, is called out by a third character in this book where they basically say that character is unable to accept failure. They just can never handle. They have no ability to handle failure because they've had a perfect life where they've been the best at everything. They have no ability to compensate that. So during challenging times, that character just starts breaking down because they've never actually encountered failure in their life before. And I just like the way those characterizations happened. It explains their personalities and also, in a way, it gives them a lot of agency. Like Rin, at every opportunity, she is actively choosing to make those choices. She's not being dragged along by some plot or third parties pushing her around. She is actively making those choices, whether you agree or disagree, but you also understand at least somewhat why those choices are being made. I don't know. That's something I like.
Yeah, I think it's like why I always say I like Batman as a superhero the most, because he doesn't have a special power that got him there. Now, granted, this happens a bit later in the book. And then the millions, billions, like take that out of the way. Batman has to work hard. Okay. So, and I felt that in the beginning of the book. It's like I felt like I could be Rin. I would make the same decision Rin makes. Like when she's studying hard for the exam, that would have been me. I would have done that. I would have worked hard. I would have done it. When she gets her military training, like the actual fighting combat training, cut off of her because she does something bad in the book. She still finds a way to get it. She still learns. She learns through books. So all these decisions Rin makes in the beginning of the book, I'm like, I could be Rin. I totally get Rin. I feel for her. I understand her until I didn't. But yeah, so I think the author did have some true magic in the first, with writing these characters. Some, not all of them. I whine about that in my halfway point. But yeah, that's where Rin stands out quite a bit.
So one of the other thing that I really like about this story is, in a way, it has this history, bringing history to life aspect to it. There's so much of this book just draws from real world history. There's this group in the setting called the Psych, and they are basically the Empire's assassination team. And there really was an assassination corps of about 10 people in historical China. There's the Keju from the very beginning pulls from the bureaucratic examination done during the Chinese Empire. A lot of the locations, like Sinigard, is basically Beijing. In fact, I saw somewhere that the accent they describe is basically the Beijing accent. So it draws for a lot of things from the real world. And when you get to things like the war story, it brings in some of those real world horror stories, things that, that we don't get to see very often, and is often not well, because it's distasteful. It's hard to take in, things like the Nanjing Massacre or the Rape of Nanking, depending on pronunciation, which was an event where the Japanese just decimated a city, killing the local population. Things like the Yellow River flood, the one of the Mugen, his name is Shiro, and there was a Shiro person in the real life. So if you read this story, that is based on a real person that did those kinds of things. And I think that's actually important to have a fictionalization of those kinds of events.
Yeah, on that note, when I was kind of, it's important to me that when I read something this heavy, that I investigated the author and reading and I checked out her Twitter and got like a good sense of her as a person. And it was important for her to tell these stories for, Asian history. It's not something covered a lot in books. And I completely agree with you. I think that's so important.
Yeah. However, where I do, I guess, shifting into more of a criticism state, this is, in some ways, these were some of my least actual favorite parts of the story. I really liked the magic system and the discovery of magic and her training and her team, working with her team, during the war. Those were the parts that were not actually historically relevant. Those were actually the parts I liked the most.
Fiction.
The fiction.
Are we going to go to spoilers? Should we do a spoiler alert for this next section?
Sure. We'll put up a timestamp for where you can jump to.
Here on out. Yeah, here on out, it might, I don't think we're not going to tell the whole story, but we are going to talk about very specific moments.
Yeah.
In our criticisms.
So I guess, why don't you start?
Well, oh man, you're putting it right on me. I mean, I guess I did come at you kind of strong at the beginning of the episode, so why not? Hold on. Let me look to the side here, pull out my giant list. Just kidding. Well, okay, my biggest criticism of this book, and you know what, before I go into that, this this author's first book. We've said that before. Like it's their first one, and holy crap, I could not have done this. Like this is what an amazing accomplishment for someone's first book. I have to say that to weave in history, to weave in a complex system of magic that we talked about, to build in some complexities here that were very interesting. I want a hats off to them. I don't know, we're so small, but maybe they'll see this someday. So I wanted to say that. But yeah, now I have to be mean. I did not like character development at all. I was not pleased with the character development. Like I said earlier, I picture people in my mind. It's like a movie running in there. And I am legit serious when I say people just become kind of white faces or kind of like blank androgynous sort of people, because the author does not take the time at all, outside of a few main people, to really talk about how they are. Like when one character I thought could have really benefited from some more character development was the master that teaches the strategy class, the class that Rin was so good in. She gets two or three pledges for different disciplines that she could train in, and that was one of them. And the fact that I cannot tell you what that professor looked like, that meant so much to her. I struggle with that.
I don't disagree. I think even like some of her relationships with Katai or Naja, I don't know. The relationships don't always feel quite as natural as I would have liked them to have been. Nor does and the character goes out of their way to actually push everyone away, which, and I think, but maybe that's the intent. But I'm
fine with that. Like I'm fine with pushing people away. That's her character arc. That's what she's doing. You know, that's trauma induced, and this author is writing about trauma. She said that specifically when she talks about this book. But like, it would have gone a long way to describe some of these characters more. Like Nezra, I'm not sure how to say it. She describes that character fairly well, and is very light-skinned, which the author actually goes on. If you take the time to investigate this author and really read into her research on this, she wanted to talk about skin color, a bit of racism in Asian culture, and how about lighter skin is very popular. So she goes into that, which is very, very interesting to read. Not my words, talking about hers. And so she wanted...
That does come up quite a bit, especially in the early part of the book. Because the main character Rin has a darker skin tone because she's from the South, whereas the people in the capital are all extremely pale, and so she stands out in a way that makes her uncomfortable. And there is some obvious racism or colorism that's occurring.
Yeah. And when the author writes about, again, I'm going to say Nezra, she takes time to talk about the beauty of the character. And really all that said is that there's light skin, and that at moments, like, Rin's kind of taken away at how beautiful this character is. But nothing more, really. Like, not enough for me to, like, picture them. So, and then that's also character-wise as well. We know this particular character is, raised from kind of this highbrow family, a high-ranking military family, has grown up with everything at their fingertips, and we get that aspect of their personality, but not much more. Like, that's it. See, we get surface-level character development here.
Okay. Yeah. The when we were doing the positives, the character development I brought up was in a lot of ways that was the limit. Like there maybe that's why it stood out to me, was because there wasn't a lot, but when it happened, it did it showed that it was being thought of, but it wasn't being explained, especially for anyone outside of the main character. But I think this might be a side effect of having a single point of view character, because that single point of view character largely just doesn't care. There's really only two characters in the whole book where that character really cares about what that person looks like. Her friend, or Naja, and then Alton. And those are the only two characters that are described in any fashion, because those are the two that she finds attractive. And by attractive, I mean this is not a romance book in any fashion.
It's really not.
This is about as opposite of...
Which goes into one of my criticisms, which is beautiful segue, Rob. We're getting good at this. I am not going to make a secret of this. I love a little romance in my books. I love a little buildup of characters. Is so-and-so going to get their first kiss? Especially at this age. They're young. They're 16. Like, come on. Like, I was kind of like, it's got to happen somewhere. It's got to happen. She's going to get her first kiss. She's at least going to get a hug, some hands brush in the dark. I don't know. No. And that's fine. Not every book needs it. But you know what? When you're lacking love in a book of any sort, this could be a love between a parent and a child. And we know that Rin didn't have that growing up in her adoptive home. But we don't even get that deep connection with a friendship. Like, we got it a little bit with Kate. Kate invites her to his home over, I believe, a holiday weekend because she doesn't know where to go, and shows her true kindness. But it wasn't developed much deeper than that. And I think I would have felt more attached to Rin. And I think I would have felt more attached to Kite even, if there was just a bit more like, it's not love again in that relationship way, just in that I would die for you way, because they're like raised together in this military academy. And in some books like Harry Potter, for example, when the adorable one, the Hufflepuff, I forget his name, when he like goes to defend them on the bridge and like saves everyone, like there was loyalty is a form of love in a way, like none of it. And then spoiler here, this is a big spoiler, Nezra, I'm going to say it wrong the whole time. I'm going to put an R in it that doesn't exist, but they're enemies for a large part of the book. And there's one scene in particular where there's 2 books left, so I don't want to believe this character's died. I'm going to say in my mind that they haven't, but in the book it says that they have, but I still don't believe, just because there's some clues that make me think that they didn't. But he gets taken down and he's like crawling to her. They make eye contact. And this is a moment that the author doesn't go into it, but if you like imagine enough, which I wish I didn't have to do so much, but if you imagine enough, there's some sort of love or respect or something that he has developed for her. And you get it in this tiny, 2-3 paragraphs of this horrible moment that's happening to all of them, where he's like crawling and reaching for her despite their troubled past. And I was like, that's the closest that this author really ever got to showing any form of human connection, which I think is sad.
Yeah, her friendship with Najad is what that as it changes throughout the story, it does reflect, at the characters are growing or they're moving past their pettiness of childhood during this wartime, but she always has this distrust. Is he just spying, and so she keeps him at arm's length. I do like that. I do like the connection there. His character, I think, is actually one of the ones that I find intriguing, because one of the other shaman thinks he might be a shaman.
Yes, exactly. That's why.
And that's a spoiler. So, but you don't really see it. But it's not shown. But that implies that maybe there's something going to happen in the future.
Yeah, there's a lot around that character, and let's hoping nobody spoils these in the comments. Please don't. But we haven't read, at least I haven't read the 2nd and 3rd books, and I think that there's a lot of potential with that character, and I'm hoping to see the author grow. The
other kind of criticism I'd have, and this mostly comes down to essentially an editor pushing back on an author and getting to really flesh out an idea. And it has to do with the magic system. And this is, since we're in the spoiler section, I'll talk about it here. But one of the things that happens in this magic system is you can be almost become possessed or become an avatar of one of these gods. And if that happens, you basically become an immortal being. The god just takes over. They're piloting from here on out. And this seems like a system that is doomed to apocalypse the planet. Why hasn't it happened before now? So in the Wheel of Time, one of the bad guys, the Forsaken in the Wheel of Time, joins the bad guys because in that setting, time repeats. And so that character just does the math and says, if time's always repeating, yeah, the good guys can win 99% of the time, or 99.999% of the time. The bad guys only need to win once. And if you do the math, eventually I would just rather be on the winning side. So
yeah, that's so dark.
And that's why that character fell to darkness, fell to evil in the Wheel of Time. And that happens way before the books. This is a past thing. But that's how I kind of feel about this setting. The way the shamanism is described, it's like, how has the world not been completely destroyed by one of these gods just running amok? Because the story does give a way to deal with them, but it's specific. Like, it's one location in the entire planet where you can deal with this. And it's, I just feel like that idea should have been a little more tested out and tried out a little bit more. And an editor could have pushed back and had this idea fleshed out. And on the plus side, it could be that the character just doesn't know any better. And, the character's been given bad information, and this could be easily resolved in future books. But within the context of this book, there's something very fundamentally flawed with the way this magic works. That seems, fatally flawed for the world, not just an individual person.
And for the algorithm, okay? Because I'm always going to do this. Sarah J. Maas. I brought her up in an episode before. Very popular author right now. A Court of Thorns and Roses books. I didn't connect it because I had never read this book before, right? So we were reading the Poppy Wars. And I see what you're saying about this flawed system in the magic. Because in the Court of Thorns and Roses, I hope, oh my gosh, you Sarah J. Maas fans, if you are watching this, yo, it is taken from this. And I don't know if this is taken from something else, but in the A Court of Thorns and Roses books, the gods, there's also gods in those books, kind of like really old gods, consider them like titans, if any of you are World of Warcraft fans. Like some of them are bad, get really bad, do naughty things, and get locked up, not shitting you, in a mountain with different tiered systems. She legit locks up gods inside a mountain. Hello, Poppy War. I'm shocked. I was shocked after reading that. And when I read A Court of Thorns and Roses first, and I thought that was like an interesting system, but in that series, spoiler on that, a bunch of times the gods get out because there's a way to let them out. So you develop this system to control your magic, but it has just like a door you can open. I'm just like, okay, so like this is your fail safe. This is your like safe, and you lock it up and you throw away the key, but like really there's just like a door. Like, I don't know. I know I tangented, but that is for the algorithm, Rob. You'll thank me later when our comments are full of SMJ. Wait, SJM. I didn't even get that right.
Did you have anything else, any other criticisms that you wanted to raise?
Yeah, I think that I talked about this in the trigger warnings a little bit, and you said this with the editor comment. I think this author was good, and this was a good first book. I think this could have really been a great first book with a good editor. I think, and I don't know, I haven't looked up who the editor was, but it seems to me like a really great or good even editing team could have made a good author great. Because I feel like two things. I made comments on these. The book reads like an action film, meaning that the locations aren't all that important. Like you've seen it in action films before. They go from here to there, and not really so much of a question of how they got there.
Yeah, and a good chunk of the book is actually like action movie montages Like here's the
Yeah.
here's the pig carrying the pig montage. Here's the war montage.
Da-da-da-da.
Yeah, there's a series of montages that as time passes.
And it reads that way because the author never, aside from traveling in the very first portion of the book, like I'm talking first 40 pages, when she goes from her hometown in the Rooster province to Sinregard to go to the school, she's driving in that carriage and she's looking out the window and she's seeing scenery for the first time, like I think that's the only time travel was really described. Occasionally they're on a boat, but really legit, we'll get to the map later, they just end up places and they fight. But like it just, you're just taken there, like you said, like a montage. So there's that. And then my other big thing I think an editor could have helped with is I think that the author was gratuitous in wanting so badly to tell this story of history that it's overdone sometimes. Like I got a bit tired. Like I don't think that the author had to go so deep into telling the vicious stories of the war crimes and to going in detail, like legit RF Kuang. I do not understand why you did not describe characters to us. Like could not give us facial features, could not explain people at all, but you can go into detail, gruesome, awful, make me almost throw up detail about destroying life and detailing it in such a way that that's difficult for me to ever forget. And you don't give any attention to that to the main characters. That is just a big, big criticism for me. I think it was gratuitous violence for the sake of writing about violence. I think it was shock factor. I think they wanted this book talked about. I think when you want a book talked about and you're wanting to sell it and it's your first novel, you write 2 pages of utter catastrophe that's vile and you ride that wave of publicity. I don't know. I wasn't reading that publicity when the book came out, but I'm imagining that's probably what happened.
All right.
And that might be harsh.
Yeah.
But it was gratuitous violence.
I can't disagree that there's a whole chapter that is incredibly hard to read. And while it has value to the greater story, especially as a motivating, it is a brutal part of the book to read. Even for someone like myself who enjoys dark stories, this was how to describe this. This was, you're watching an action adventure movie, Indiana Jones, and then out of nowhere it becomes Hostel or Saw. I was thinking Saw. For like 5 minutes, and then it goes back to the action adventure. Yeah, and totally does. And that's it. It's a jarring chapter. It's misplaced to me. In all of it, I think I would have, if I could rewrite that, because it's not always about talking about the problems; it's about giving solutions, right? If I could rewrite that, give them guidance, I would say, tell us it through Kite. I would love a Kite chapter. Now, I know that the book is from Rin's point of view, but I think it would have been nice. Kite does tell his story. Kite's actually in that moment when it happens. His battalion or whatever section of the army was stationed there. But I would have liked him recounting that a bit more. Now, part of the story that is gruesome to read is told through somebody else, one of her comrades at the school. And that's actually the section that's really, really bad. I think I might have... I actually think that's one of the saving graces of that chapter, is that it is almost entirely told in the third person. The main character, the point of view character, doesn't personally witness these atrocities. She witnesses the aftermath of it. And I think that's actually, if the character had actually been there the whole time, I think it would have become, that's when it would have become way too much. So I think by backing it off and making it a third person makes it a lot more digestible, even though it was still a hard read. Yeah, and to be fair, because I'm quite, scathing in my review on some of this. To be fair, the person who tells their story is someone who has a lot of reason to be angry at Rin, and wants Rin to know how much she suffered.
So this person's telling what happened that she witnessed through her eyes, and she wants Rin to feel bad. She wants Rin to know exactly how bad it was and why she's angry. And that's valid. I'll give it that.
And that's why I think the chapter has a lot of value, especially for as a motivating and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I understand an argument of, hey, we could have backed off on some of this description and maybe added more description somewhere else. Such as with her friends or her student peers.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. And I also have this, like, after watching movies like Saw, for example, like, I think there's someone writing this somewhere. This comes from someone's brain. Now, granted, this is scary. There's people out there who have this stuff in their brain holes. And so in this author's defense, these things did happen, but still the descriptive storytelling of it, since this happened centuries ago, like how many? A long time.
Like,
right? This is
like 75 years.
What?
This was World War II.
Oh, come on. We can't even edit this out. It's too funny. I have to leave it. Oh man, this is why Rob is on the show. Okay, that aside, this was this person's telling of it.
Yes.
Which means it came from their brain hole.
And it is a fiction.
Scary.
And it absolutely is a fictionalization. This is not a one-for-one with the events that happened during World War II. It is
right, exactly.
It's an analogy or a story of explaining the general idea. It's a fictionalization.
It's fair to say I didn't like it. I didn't like that part. I get why they did it.
Yes.
So it's two-handed.
Okay.
Didn't like it. Get why you did it. All right.
All right. So
moving on. What do you got for me, Rob? What do you got for me?
All right. So we discussed in our previous videos that one of the things I really like about fantasy books is the maps, and this book does include a map. However, one thing to think about is everything about this book is basically just borrowing from real world China and Japan. So the map. You would think the map would be very straightforward. It's just going to be kind of, erase names and put in different names. And then, so we'll go ahead and bring it up here. And this is just bullshit. This is the dumbest, map I've ever seen. So the biggest thing that stands out is this is just a common problem with most fantasy maps. Is they only put in the countries that are relevant for this one story. There's only 2 countries on here, Nikan and Mugen. That's it. This is a common problem with most fantasy maps. But as I said, that's a common problem. This is not the part that pisses me off. The part that pisses me off is the river. This dumb river. Okay. If you ever look at a map and you see a river, it starts with a lot of little rivers and becomes one big river and then dumps out into the ocean. This river...
Rob, you're going to... Okay, I thought of all the things that you were going to go into on this map, and I have a list of them. And you say the river...
Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there one thing at a time.
Okay, well, I'm preparing myself.
So this river... Not only does it split or 3 separate times on its way to 2 different bodies of water, it goes up the mountains and then back down. Right here by Chulu Creek. That's not how rivers work. You have this entire area, which I guess is supposed to be Tibet. This plateau.
Maybe a shaman with water powers.
Yeah.
Maybe a shaman with water powers did it.
but this plateau area, which is supposed to be, it's like there's no reason for a square-shaped mountain range plateau to just be there on this plateau. There's no explanation for that. The map doesn't follow real world logic when everything else implies that at least you're in the real world plus magic. Like I struggle with this. And or they said that Spear, which is basically Taiwan, they call it the Teardrop Island. Have you ever seen it? Taiwan looks like a teardrop. This looks like a potato.
Potato. Oh man. Okay.
So,
well, that's fair.
but no, this map I find very just irritating because like you had a wealth of actual good maps to use from. You know, pick one, scrub out the words. I mean, that's basically what you did. What they did for everything else in this book was scrub out the proper nouns and put in new proper nouns. And then the map, they just, it's like a person's never seen a map before.
My review wasn't quite as scathing. But yes. Shish. I want to point out some good things. Okay, let's talk about what's good about this map.
Sure.
First of all, it's hard to see, but I do appreciate the illustration of just adding some whimsical to it. There is the dragon in the background, kind of cool. And also the provinces are essentially the astrological signs, like the Chinese year of, right? Year of the dragon, the rooster, the rat, the hare, right? So that's actually really cool that they brought that into this. I enjoy that. And then I didn't know this, I had to look it up, but and you have mentioned it, but yeah, this basically mimics China, or at least part of a portion of it, and Japan and Taiwan. So they've just kind of flipped Japan around. So I think that's cool. I just don't get the sense when I'm reading a book, I like to flip back. I don't know if you guys do this. I like to flip back to the map when I'm reading and kind of find out where I'm at. And because this was so action movie based, and they're all around all over the place, it didn't occur to me, for example, when they were in Golenice, if that's how you say that was like next to Rooster, for example, which is where she grew up. And I just didn't get the sense of kind of going through the area very well. And when I look at the map of where things are, it never crossed this way in my mind. In my mind, I felt like Spear was actually much closer to Sinregard. Just because of the way the author talked about it in conjunction with each other, I didn't realize that it was so far away. And so, yeah, the map itself just didn't match up to the way the author told the story. But again, the way the author told the story is in this like action montage way.
Yeah. Or very simply, the book starts off in a town in Rooster Province. That's an easy thing. You just could have put a dot.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. The place where you start the book isn't on the map, and you spend a whole 2 chapters there.
Yeah.
So
and a very symbolic journey as well.
Yeah. So that I don't know that I did not enjoy that map.
What would you what's our scale going to be? Because this is our first time doing this. So we showed you the map. Show me the map.
Yeah.
You guys have got that. But what would we rate this map? Was it a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10?
1 to 5.
Okay. I'm gonna give it it's a more than a 3. I would call a 3. You know, it's a 3. It's adequate.
Okay. I would give it a 2. I think it's below adequate. But could it be worse? Yeah, I can imagine a world where it's worse. But this was a very disappointing map, especially because it was like this should have been an easy win, considering considering the source material and how much draws from the real world. This map should have been an easy win, and I'm just being vindictive.
Even seeing the mountain like drawn on there like in a cool way, like I like maps where like it shows actual like buildings on it more too, like when they're showing Sinregard on here and Golenice, and when they're showing like I forget the name of like the
pagoda,
Chinese pagoda. Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's the right.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the symbol that they use on the map. They use the same one where when they talk about Golanice, that is a complex military base with giant walls around it. And it was a fortress, essentially. And that would have been nice to see that drawn. Same with the city that they're defending when Altan takes over. I can't remember. Takes over like a section of the army, the Psyche. Um, that city, I think it starts with a K.
That's Coeur
Yes, that city is like a point that they want to hold and defend. It's very, very important. They make it out to be for several chapters, and that it was like a defensible point that the country cared very, very much about protecting. But it's not drawn like that on the map. I like when they do that, when they rise things up,
especially
and really like show relief that way.
And I can agree where like Coeur d'Alene or Senegard, where even a small sketch, just because you spend a third of the book in those two cities, the so much
Kitte's house, that would have been cool,
just a rough, that would have been nice. But yeah, the map itself doesn't make any logical sense. It's like
another thing, some books with maps.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, okay. Well, some books with maps, they'll have a map page, and then they'll have another page, like the Pantheon. That would have been way cool to see drawn out, and the different levels of that, because that is a focal point in this storytelling.
Yeah, and
give me a drawing.
I forgot to mention that the rivers, essentially, it's all just one river that splits a bunch of ways, which is really bad, but like it just starts up near the essentially Mongolia area. You have a spot that's supposed to be Tibet. That's where all the rivers should be coming from. They should be coming out of the mountains and then heading towards the ocean. They all just start up at the hinterlands.
I don't even think they put the dam on here.
It is.
Oh, they do. It is. Okay. It is down here.
And that's on the same river.
That's not. And it's not near where I thought it was. That's probably why I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I never in my mind pictured it that close to Sinregard.
Yep. So
Okay. Well, there you have it.
All right. So I guess we did my pet thing, which is the maps. How about yours? Were there any crossbows?
Okay. Yeah. So, we are reading Crossbow, and I actually texted it to you earlier. So I'm going to pull up this text and see what page it's on. Oh, this is going to be a spoiler. Okay. So I think there might have actually been one when she's looking at the weapons in the training facility, when she walks into that military training area at Sinregard for the first time and is in training with June. And I don't think she's come across that type of like weaponry before. So I think there might have been one there. Maybe our viewers can find it. But the one that popped out to me was, because I was just reading the last bit of this, 489 in this particular book. It'll be different for audiobooks or books on Kindle. But in 489, there's this really, really cool part where a crossbow actually plays a very interesting part of the story. And I'm so excited because I thought we might just be counting crossbows, like, 2 instances of a crossbow. And we're going to have a crossbow system as well, I think, skill. Because if there was a lot of crossbows, but it's just like a war novel, and then we're hearing them like throw it on their back and like a favorite crossbow going over that's like a little crossbow mention, right? Not pivotal to the story. If a crossbow like takes somebody out, right? Like if a death blow gets landed, because that would be an epic moment, crossbow moment. So I'm surprised because we actually have a somewhat epic crossbow moment. Spoiler again. So Altan is one of the main characters. There's a research facility. I won't go too much into it. And he's kind of researched. Think of like Stranger Things. I think of Stranger Things when I think of this relationship, if you've seen that show, where she has this like definitely not healthy relationship with her a physician, if you will, or research leader in the laboratory, and she calls him Papa. It's definitely unhealthy because some codependency there, and definitely in some ways thinks of him as a father figure, although she hates him. So similar-ish situation happens in this story, and the person wielding the crossbow in this kind of epic moment is Altan's Stranger Things version of a Papa, sort of. This person is doing horrible things to Altan and doing research and studies on him, but also at times like casually touches his cheeks and like cares for him and definitely shows, if not love, appreciation for what he is and what he can do. So I
Yeah.
consider that Crossbow moment pretty epic.
No, that's a definitely a impactful for the whole story and the way that occurs. That was a great find.
Yeah. So nothing super significant happens with the crossbow. It's just there in the moment. It's essentially a prop. But it happened. It was there. So if I had to rate the crossbows in this book, I would give it a 4.
Okay. I think that's I'll go with that because it is a key story moment and it is front and center. So now we're getting to the end. I guess the question is, how would you rate this book? And would you be interested at all in reading the sequels? Is there enough here to merit the sequels for you?
Okay. I knew this was coming. And if you saw our first episode, our origin story, we talk about Robert refusing to finish a book because like it just pissed him off so much. And then we talk about me reading books because I just have to. So Rob, I'm very pissed at you. I don't know if I'm going to forgive you easily for this one. You started me on this book. I bought the trilogy. I did. I want to read on for, how do you say it?
Nezra?
Nezra.
Or Naja. Oh, no, it's Naja.
Naja?
Yeah.
I want to read on solely for that character, not for Rin. I'm going to hold my stance on this. Not for Rin. I am done with her. She has to do some dramatic redemption arc for me to come back to her. But I'm in for him. I have a feeling about him. There's something. He had a severe injury that happens middle-ish of the book that he recovers from. And that's where some skepticism comes of like, ooh, there might not be something completely natural with this boy. And then they just leave it alone. They never talk about it again. So am I going to read the next book? Yeah, I'll read it. But not for her. How would I rate this book? I think it's easier to say would I refer this book. I think it's going to be difficult for me to recommend this book because I saw so many flaws in the character development, so much violence. In general, to my audience, to the people I know that have come to watch this channel because they know me through my gamer tag and like, following me on my adventures. No, I'm not going to recommend it to you. I'm only recommending it to people that want to sign up for that. You truly know what you're getting into. We've truly warned you, and you like magic systems. I'm recommending it to people who truly enjoy reading about magic and possibility.
Sounds good. I think for myself, I'm also there's some problems with this book, and we've discussed them at length. But for me, what I would continue on and read the sequels as well, and my reasoning for doing so has a lot to do with a lot of the flaws or criticisms that we've levied are pretty much book specific and are not unrecoverable going forward. Having more character interpersonal relationships, as far as even just friendships. It doesn't have to be romance, but just the friendships that can go on. More descriptive things that can be improved. The magic system. I'm very interested in this magic system. It's pretty unique for me. I haven't experienced or I haven't read a lot with this kind of magic. That I'm very curious on where this goes. The fact that this uses real world history to tell a fantasy story with, I find that all very compelling. And like I said, a lot of the criticisms we've had, I think, definitely are easily recoverable. They're not fatal flaws of the story itself. how would I rate the book out of 5? I'd probably rate it. I'd give it a 3. I'm satisfied. This is a solid first book. I think if the author had an editor who pushed back a little harder to, be like, hey, maybe back off here and fluff up or add a little more description over here, let's load test this this magic system a little bit. I think this could have been a great first novel. I think for a first novel, this is actually a solid book. But it does have some things that are hard to read, and that those are specific to this book and not necessarily the sequels.
I think it's important to say, too, that when talking about reviews, we should probably talk about other reviews out there, too. And this is a very, very highly rated book on a lot of sites.
It won
high 9s.
It won a lot of awards when it came out.
Yeah. So this is like, just because our opinion of this is like maybe a bit lower. And who knows, maybe Rob could have talked me down, or I could have talked him down while we're kind of talking this out. I don't know. But this is in general a very highly rated book. And her most recent book, Yellow Eyes, I think it's called, was actually retweeted by Stephen King, saying he couldn't put it down. It's a fast read. This author's amazing, and high praise for R.F. Kuang as an author in general. And that's coming from Stephen King, which is incredible. So there could be something that we're just missing here. Maybe these are people who've read the full trilogy. I'm unsure, but I just think it is important to note that in general, very, very highly rated book and author.
Yeah. So great. Well, I guess book 1 done. Next up is The Fourth Wing. Well,
yes, I have that here too. So we are going to be reading Fourth Wing next. This is my choice. I checked on Book Talk today to see if this was still gathering steam, and heck yes it is, because the sequel is out at the beginning of November. So this book is taking off. We probably won't get our episodes for this out until after the sequel has come out. But yes, this is the next one. So if you want to follow along with us, this is going to be, the book is by Rebecca Yarros. And the next episode after this is actually Robert's halfway review of the book. So please make sure to tune into that. We record those separate from each other. So when I recorded my halfway point for the Poppy War, Robert wasn't around for that. He didn't get to hear what I was saying or what my reviews were. It's fully my take, unaffected. So, I haven't started this yet. I think you said you gave it a little look into. So I'm going into this totally blind. But interestingly enough, in my book talk look into this, this is rated right up there with like A Court of Thorns and Roses. So, Robert, I don't know if you're getting boobies. I have no idea if you're getting dragon sex. Like, I don't know. And I'm not going to apologize for any of it.
Well,
all right.
I am looking forward to being strongly critical of this book as well.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, you know what? If you want to be critical with us too, if you want to follow along, we have just kicked off our Discord. We're starting to get some members in there. Thank you for that. Make sure to join our Discord below, join in on the conversations, make some book recommendations, and follow us on all of our other socials, which are linked below. Thank you for joining us. We had a great time with you, and we hope to see you again.
And don't forget to like and subscribe, or else Lana is going to have to cosplay a character of my choice from this book.
Seriously, Rob?
Seriously.